What's up, everyone? Welcome to another devlog for Clanga, the personal finance web app I'm developing to replace Mint. It's Wednesday night here, and I've been doing some additional testing on the budgets integration work from last week. Overall, I'm very satisfied with how well it's working, but I did notice a couple of smaller items that I missed when I compared it with the goals view. One, I need to add the disable functionality to the update button in the edit budget dialog when there aren't any changes made yet. That way, we avoid any extra calls to the DB with no updates. And two, I think I would like to add the snack bar messages to this view as well. The flow in the goals view is so seamless and provides a really good user experience with visual confirmations, and I really believe this should be in the budgets view. I'll kick off this week's dev work by starting with these two changes, and then I'll start on the transactions integration. I'll be circling back with some updates after I finish up for tonight. Hey guys, I was able to quickly knock out these two tasks tonight. I did both of these in the goals view, so it was pretty easy to incorporate them in the budgets view as well. Here's a look at the updated edit dialog where you can see that the update button is disabled when the dialog first opens. That is because neither of the fields have been changed and thus there is nothing to update yet. Once I make a change, the update button becomes enabled and I can click it to submit the changes. As the dialog closes, you can see we get the snack bar message at the bottom to notify that the update was successful. And looking at the budget I just updated, you can see the change. I then started to analyze the different CSVs of transactions I downloaded from different bank accounts to come up with a way to structure the data in Firestore. I can't just store the transactions as they are in the CSVs because different providers have different columns in their exported CSVs. So I'll need to come up with a mapper for each provider to the structure that I want. But I also want to be able to reference the original transaction in order to display it to the user as a note, similar to how you see it in this screenshot. Right now, I've landed on the following structure to get started with. The statement transaction field will be used to store the original transaction as it is imported from the CSV. The transaction field will be used to store the transaction in the structure I need for this application. I've also included a field for the account in order to be able to keep transactions sorted. The UID field is pretty straightforward. It's the ID of the user who the transaction belongs to. The last two fields are things I think will be useful. The mapping field will be used to reference the mapping that was used to map the original transaction to the application transaction structure. Storing this could be useful for making updates if the mapping changes and the user wants to update all of the transactions that already used that mapping. The signature field will be an experimental way to check if a transaction has already been imported. My plan will be to use a hashing function on the original transaction and store it here to be checked every time the user imports new transactions. My hope here is that this will reduce, if not eliminate, the chance of importing duplicate transactions. One other note about the structure, I do plan on the transaction field storing an array of child transactions. The reason for this is providing the user with the ability to split transactions. When that happens, all of the transactions will exist in this array and should sum up to the original transaction total. I think this will be a neat way to keep things clean and transaction data together. I did also look into creating a subcollection to store these child transactions because it is recommended that each document in Firestore be lightweight. But after giving it some thought, I think using a subcollection here isn't necessary. For one, I don't think there will be a large number of transactions that will be split. And if there are split transactions, I don't see them being split more than 2 or 3 times, which means this array would only contain up to 2 or 3 elements. And that doesn't sound too heavyweight to me. Anyway, this is where I will leave things for tonight. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just finishing up with work on Thursday and getting ready to dive into some dev work for Clanga. I've been looking back over the document structure I came up with for storing transactions in Firestore, and I'm comfortable enough with it to move forward. I'll go ahead and create the collection in Firestore and maybe add one document to start with. This is NoSQL storage, so it's actually pretty easy to experiment with different structures in the collection because the documents don't even have to have the same fields. I plan to focus on developing the code to read from the new collection and probably editing. Once I feel pretty comfortable with that functionality, I'll move on to adding transactions from CSV uploads. But that will probably be later in the week or even next week, as I think the edit functionality will take a bit of time to implement. Before I dive in, I would like to say I'd be really interested in getting some feedback on the design of the transactions document structure and overall integration, so do leave those comments below. With that being said, I'll get started and be back later with some updates. What's up, guys? I've got some updates from tonight's dev work. I created the new collection and added one document to it for testing. After that, I started to implement the code for reading from the new collection. Most of it follows the same steps as I used for reading from the goals and budgets collections, but I did have to add a mapping step so that I could pull the data from the transaction field for displaying in this table. I'm still experimenting a little with this mapping, and I definitely think it could be cleaned up a bit before moving too far ahead, but it does seem to be working. One thing I think I will need to do is create my own data source class instead of using the mat data source class provided in the material Angular library. Looking at the documentation, it says this class is really meant for simple client-side data sources and not necessarily for server interactions. I'll keep an eye on this as I get past the experimenting phase. One other note is that I haven't really set up my read function to work with the pagination yet. I wanted to get something together pretty quickly so I could start working on the edit and add functionalities. But I'll plan to update the read function when I work on implementing the pagination feature in the table. Moving on, you can see the transaction for the one document I created is getting populated in the table. And when I hit the edit button, I even have the fields pre-populated with the data for this row. This will be a perfect place to pick up either tomorrow or Saturday when I get some time. For now, I'm going to shut it down for the night. Happy Saturday, guys. I took the night off yesterday and just relaxed, so I'm nice and refreshed today and ready to crush some dev work. I know Thursday I stopped just before starting on the edit functionality for a transaction in the table, so that is where I'll get started today. I think this will be some very interesting work and will probably result in some slight modification to the document structure in order to get things working properly. I also noticed that I need to format the date field properly before passing it to the edit view under the transaction row so that it displays correctly. Additionally, I keep going back and forth on whether I want to include the functionality to actually modify the date. Personally, I don't see much of a use for that, and just thinking out loud here, it could cause some difficulties implementation wise. I'm starting to think I will disable the field in the edit view for now, and I'll look for some feedback in the comments. You also may have noticed that I haven't created fields for notes or tags in the document structure so far, but I will plan to add those. The notes field will be really simple to add as a string type in the document. The tags field, however, will be a little more interesting. This is where I'll provide the ability to tag transactions to a goal, and it will start to show up in the goals progress view. However, I think there will be more than just goal tags, such as tax deductible. And I think it would be good to be able to have multiple tags on some transactions. So this seems like it should be an array of strings in our document structure. Once again, I'll experiment with that and adjust as needed. I'll stop rambling for now and kick things off. Hopefully I'll be able to make a lot of progress today since it will probably be the last day of dev work for this video. All right, guys, back here with a recap of tonight's dev work. I made a lot of headway with editing transactions tonight, and I'm really liking the user experience so far. I'll open up the edit view for this transaction, and you can see I updated the date field with the correct date formatting and disabled the field for now. This means that the date and the amount fields of the transaction will not be editable. You'll notice that the save button at the bottom is also disabled to start with and will become enabled when I actually make a change to one of the editable fields. As I update the category using the select dropdown, it becomes enabled and I can click it to persist the change. The edit view collapses and you can see the change here. I'll open the view back up to look at a couple more things. I currently have the description, category, and notes fields working correctly. For the add tag select dropdown, I did populate the options, that is using both the tags options list in the constants TypeScript file and the current user's goals. I currently only have one option added to the constants list, but I will work to expand the list as I go forward. I plan to hold off on persisting this value until I decide for sure on the document structure for storing it, and I need to update the goals service to update the contributed totals should the user select a goal here. More updates to come on that next week, hopefully. For now, I think I'm ready to call it a night and close out this week's work. If you have any questions or feature ideas, I'd love to see them in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe for more updates on development progress for Clanga. See you next time.